So my first question is about the notion of Indo-Pacific. It's a recent and subjective term, and it is relying on the different countries' point of view. So for you, what does the term Indo-Pacific mean? And is it a geographical, political, or an economic notion?
It is, see, I mean, what coming from India, my notion would be pretty much in line with how probably India views Indo-Pacific. So what India really views it, it's kind of amalgamation of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. As you said rightly, that every country has a different notion of Indo-Pacific. So what India considers is it includes the Africa, it includes the Asian continent. It's different from the US, as every country has different definitions. It is definitely geographical. It is also geopolitical, because you also need to understand why is Indo-Pacific getting a lot of attention. So there are a lot of reasons. First of all, I think, I mean, if I can just take a bit of time to kind of discuss with you why I feel it is getting a lot of attention. First of it would be, we all know that it is one of it. We all know the economics bit of it. We know that 80% or 90% of the trade goes through it. We understand that economically this is very important, and of course economics play a big part. But then other than that, why have the countries suddenly started accepting the notion of Indo-Pacific? I think mainly because, first of all, it is ambiguous. Now, when I say ambiguous, it gives all the, it becomes more inclusive when the term becomes ambiguous. So when I'm saying Asia Pacific, as you, I think, have rightly put it in your article, you have shown where the Asia Pacific is and what are its boundaries. And then you've shown what is the boundaries for Indo-Pacific. So you've clearly shown how Indo-Pacific has a larger boundary. So we can say that more countries feel connected with the concept, and more countries can play with the geographical notion, the political notion of Indo-Pacific, and give its own definition to Indo-Pacific according to their own national interests and according to their own economic interests, and such like that. So when we talk about Indo-Pacific, we now have different visions by different countries. So we have an Indian vision of Indo-Pacific, we have an ASEAN vision of Indo-Pacific, we have a Japanese vision, US vision, even the Europe now has countries like UK have an Indo-Pacific vision, the French have an Indo-Pacific vision. So we do have many visions of Indo-Pacific. So one of the reasons I think people find it probably more interesting to shift towards this notion is that apart from it being the economic hub, it is the economic hub, we all understand that, but it is also a way to kind of get involved in the geopolitics. When I'm talking about geopolitics, coming to that part, a lot of flashpoints are a part of the Indo-Pacific. So if you look at, for instance, there are many unresolved geopolitical issues which are happening, where countries do understand that to kind of be prominent, to play a prominent role in the geopolitical affairs, they have to be connected with the discussion around these unresolved issues. For instance, the unresolved issue of South China Sea and East China Sea, that's very much a part of the Indo-Pacific. And when we look at countries who are kind of drawn into these discussions, you can see more and more countries drawn into these discussions. Countries which probably are geographically far away from these unresolved issues are also discussing about it and slowly kind of incorporating them in their own national policies. They're making them their own national interests. So with this Indo-Pacific, we are kind of connecting the countries more geopolitically. I've talked about the South China Sea, I've talked about the East China Sea. So you know that the ASEAN is involved, you know US is involved, you know China is involved. India is also getting involved because India also has its own, India is also participating in these discussions. You also have countries from Europe discussing about it, even Canada discussing about it. So you have such a wide range of countries discussing about it. Then you have Taiwan, the cross-strait crisis. That is a part of Indo-Pacific. And you have so many countries talking about the cross-strait crisis, because apart from so many countries being affected if China attacks Taiwan, you also have countries feeling more connected or more responsible as regional powers or regional partners to discuss this so that they can come to a solution, or come to at least a discussion. You also have the Korean denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. There's so many powers who are discussing that. So this is one of this is one of the reasons countries are drawn to, if not play a very active part of the Indo-Pacific, but at least they're acknowledging Indo-Pacific as a concept. So we started with few countries acknowledging Indo-Pacific. Now we have more and more countries acknowledging it, because they do understand the geopolitical gravity of Indo-Pacific. And lastly, the countries do agree that, or if I may say, if I don't really want to say agree, but one of the reasons Indo-Pacific is in the limelight is because two of the largest economies in the world, who are also competing powers, are a part of Indo-Pacific. Now, we do understand that China does not officially acknowledge that it is, acknowledge that Indo-Pacific is a notion. It would rather use Asia-Pacific as a term, but it does get drawn into the Indo-Pacific discussions. And Indo-Pacific as a term is and has started to be recognized by the scholars of the scholarly community in China. So I think that's one of the reasons Indo-Pacific, these are few reasons I feel Indo-Pacific is getting a lot of attention and will get a lot of attention as we move forward.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you so much. Okay, now, so when we talk about the Indo-Pacific, we think of the clash of China and the United States specifically.
Right.
And we have heard many times the expression of Second Cold War. So what do you think about this expression? Can we compare really the clash that the United States had with the Soviet Union and the one that it is having with China at the moment?
I will not really term it as Second Cold War. Now, if someone is calling it a Second Cold War, I think the people also need to understand what was the situation when we were during a Second Cold War. I mean, during a Cold War between the US and USSR, they were absolutely closed from each other. They were separated from each other. Now, when we look at US and China, they are not separated. They are extremely interconnected. China's economy, if you take a look at how has China grown, you need to, China has grown a lot because of the US, because of the institutions which have been a part of the Western, the Western world for a long time. It has grown, its economy has grown a lot because of the US, because of the institutions which have been created by the US and the Western countries. And China remains one of the largest trading partners of US. That's something even US cannot, even if it is competing with China, it cannot really do away, or neither can its citizens do away from the fact that so much of connect is there between the two countries that you can't really, put an iron curtain like the one we had when we had the Cold War. You cannot put an iron curtain between the two countries who are so connected. And even if we do, I mean, of course, there are security concerns when we talk about US and China, and the security concerns remain. And I believe they're not just security concerns. And as you, I think, talked about the Thucydides trap in your article, that is definitely something which I believe does play when we talk about US and China. So we're not really looking at the Second Cold War, but it is basically the one superpower being, if I don't really want to use insecure, but it is a very normal notion. I mean, it's a very normal kind of an approach to have. Any country would like to have power, and US, which has enjoyed being the sole superpower for so many years, would not really want to kind of give its powers to another country. But at the same point of time, if China today disappears from the picture, can US really still be the economic power or the largest economy? Because a lot of because of these trade and because of China is there as the manufacturing hub until now. That is why a lot of countries, not just US, but even India for that matter, we are stable because of the trade. With China, we are so I would not really say that it's a second Cold War. There's a lot of interdependence on each other. China is equally interdependent on US as US is interdependent on China. And no matter how much as national security policies we discussed that we need to reduce dependence on China, of course, that is a thing that slowly everyone needs to, but can we really absolutely stop depending on China? I don't really think so. With globalization, I don't think any country can stop depending on the other country, and especially China, which is the manufacturing hub. I'm not very sure if that is possible. So I don't think this is a Cold War or will lead to a Cold War.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. Okay, so now in the context of the war in Ukraine, we have seen the United States being intensely involved in it. NATO is having a new push, and questions about the integration of Sweden and Finland are drawing the attention of the United States. So do you think the United States will set the Indo-Pacific aside? And if you think so, will it be an opportunity for China to develop its strategy without any obstacles, or will other actors come out?
So if you look at Biden's Indo-Pacific strategy, which came out this year, China was still one of the prominent threats it did consider. So of course, with the Russia-Ukraine war, it has kind of reiterated that Russia is also a threat and is a very prominent threat. So now the two most prominent threats, and something which even Trump's policy had, that Russia and China continue to be the threats. I don't think so. It will permanently shift its focus from the Indo-Pacific or from China to Russia. It does understand that. I do feel that the Biden administration does understand that it cannot focus the entire military or entire security. It cannot transform its entire focus towards just one sector, because if we consider US as a world power or a global power cannot situate itself in just one sector. A global power has to be, and that's exactly what Biden is trying to kind of do. It is trying to say that America is back. When we say that America is back, it is saying that America is back to being a predominant power in the entire global platform. So I don't really think that it will absolutely shift its focus from China to Russia. Of course, with daily developments which are happening, and of course with US playing a very major role in the Ukraine war, we do feel that its focus has shifted. But I don't think so. Its focus will shift to such an extent that it will absolutely not focus on what is the development that is happening. And for that matter, if you look at the developments that have happened between US and Taiwan, it is still focusing on Taiwan. It is still focusing on the military needs of Taiwan. It is still having a conversation with Taiwan, where there was also fear that with Ukraine war, is it a possibility that China kind of, China gets an idea that now that we understand that the Western powers are not that strong, that they are able to stop a war in Ukraine, is it a good opportunity to kind of invade Taiwan? If there were a lot of articles, there was a lot of discussion, but at the same point of time, we've seen that is not happening, at least until, if you look at a lot of scholarship, China itself has said that the Ukraine war is not the same as them taking over Taiwan. So both the situations are not the same. But we also seen US equal, not if not equally, but to an extent also involved with discussions and conversations with Taiwan. So it is still having a focus there. It is still having a focus in a lot of other sectors. And as I think a global power, it is trying its level best. And I think it understands that it cannot just do that. It has to have its focus everywhere, with probably a bit more focus towards the Ukraine war.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, so my second question, my next question was about Taiwan. So you already answered it, but perfect.
Right.
So we move on. So in June of this year, Xi Jinping reaffirmed his support to Moscow in terms of sovereignty and security. What does this mean? Is it a disguised way to support the Russian invasion in Ukraine? And is China trying to reinforce its relations with Russia, in order to have more weight in the Indo-Pacific?
Can you just repeat the first line? I'm so sorry, I did not really get that.
Yeah. So in June this year, Xi Jinping, so the president of China,
yes,
reaffirmed his support to Moscow in terms of sovereignty and security. He said that this month that they should build a relations and kind of an alliance around this sovereignty and security to ensure sovereignty and security. And so what does this mean exactly? Is it a disguised way, so a hidden way to support the Russian invasion in Ukraine? And is China trying to reinforce its relations with Russia in order to have more weight, more support in the Indo-Pacific? Is it clear?
Definitely. So, see, as a person who focuses on China, or somebody who focuses on China, we always need to understand that China never does anything which does not support its national interests. So when we say national interests, economics play a great part. And also China's heft in the region play a great part. If you look at China, the way China is tackling the Ukraine war, I won't say that China is very happy that this is happening, because it is a very at one part, China does want to play a role where it's looked up as a global power. When we say a global power, it is not a great image if a global power outrightly supports a power which is, involved in a war in another country. So if you look at statements by China is not outrightly supporting Russia. In no statements will you see China saying that we support Russia. Of course, when we look at the developments happening in the United Nations, where China did not vote against against Russia, but at the same point of time, it never really supported Russia. So it is kind of having a very nuanced and a very cautious approach towards this entire situation, where it does understand that its economy is tied up with the West. A lot of its economy is tied up with countries who do not support the war. So it cannot absolutely refuse to acknowledge the fact that if today it outrightly supports Russia, there would be countries with the way sanctions are going about, against Russia, there would be sanctions against China itself if China outrightly supports Russia. So I don't think so it will be outrightly supporting Russia, but at the same point of time, because if it does, then its trade would be hampered. And its trading partners, EU plays a big part. EU has been actively involved in sanctions. US plays a big part, and US has been actively involved in sanctions. So I don't think so it will outrightly support Russia. Now, at the same point of time, it can also not really do away with the partnership it holds with Russia. When we look at the recent meeting with Putin, with Xi Jinping had with Putin, it reiterated the partnership it had with Russia, and stating that it is the strongest till now. The partnership they've had, it's the strongest till now. So when we look at the way China is dealing with Russia, it is getting the benefit of Russia having to do, let's say, business with China when it comes to, countries putting sanctions on Russian banks, and Russia going to China for its exchange. China is getting a lot of advantage out of it, because even if it is not, if nobody is promoting this fact, or nobody is putting it in, nobody is really discussing it outrightly, it is at the end of the day a partner of Russia, and by not really criticizing it or not by going against it, it is getting the business Russia is not able to do with the US, Russia is not able to do with the EU, and it's getting that business out of Russia. So it is getting the business out of Russia. It's also getting at the same point of time the business it always had with the rest of the world. So definitely it is trying to play safe. It is trying to make sure that its economy does not get hampered. Of course, its economy will be hampered. Inflation is something which has come about with the Ukraine war in all the entire world, most of the world, and with COVID-19 also. But it is trying its level best to not really hamper its image of a responsible power in the order, in the global affairs. But at the same point of time, it is trying its level best to not also anger or kind of really hamper the relations it shares with Russia. So yeah, that's how exactly we've seen China playing. It will never take a very outright step because it does not really help its own national interests.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. So now, so in September 2021, the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom announced the creation of AUKUS, a security partnership, in order to help sustain peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. This is what is written in the statement, the official one.
Right.
However, do you think it is the effect that they will produce, or will tensions not increase with China instead?
The way China looks at not just AUKUS, but looks at any development which includes countries with which it does not share the best relations, China will be alerted. China will have a very cautious look towards it. For example, the way it looks at Quad, because the Quad is made up of countries with which it does not share good relations with, historically does not share good relations with, and also currently does not share good relations with. It will look at these developments from a very cautious lens. Now, when we look at AUKUS, China does look at the military implications of the AUKUS. When we are saying that it is a partnership which involves military elements, China would at the same point of time be looking at its own. China would take it as, let's say, a competition, or China would look at it as a way to kind of respond to China's activities in the Indo-Pacific. And this would alert China in a way that it will also want to enhance its own military power to kind of, respond to these kind of developments, and which has happened when we look at how the AUKUS has been formed. We did have these kind of responses from China where it wasn't happy, and not surprisingly happy, because it will take it as a threat to its own stability. And when I'm saying its own stability, its own ambitions of expanding its power projection in the Indo-Pacific, it will of course take it. If you look at geographically, you have UK, US, and Australia. That is exactly the Indo-Pacific theater, and that is exactly where China would want to enhance its power projection. So it does feel that if militarily these countries enhance their partnership, it will be a threat to its goals of strengthening its military or expanding its military, and its goals of also strengthening and enhancing its own power, not just military, but also economic, also geopolitical. So of course, that would be an issue for China. It will not really, though it will not outrightly say it or outrightly do anything, but if you would have these small developments, China would, China would initiate some in the course of time, as these developments also take place with the three countries. It would also kind of make sure that it is being self-sufficient and strengthening its own military economy, and also its own partnerships with other countries. For example, its own partnerships with, let's say, Pakistan. It is also strengthening these so that it can counter if its fear of them, starting, if not a war, but starting a more stronger military response against China. It will definitely want to stay prepared in every which way.
Now we will focus on India. So it's an emerging country member of the BRICS and the second economy of Asia. So in the scope of the United States, US-China confrontation in the Indo-Pacific, what would be the role of India according to you?
So the role of India in the US-China competition?
Yeah, what role could India have in this confrontation between China and the United States?
Right. So I believe when we're looking at US-China competition, you don't really have a winner in this competition. That is exactly what India perceives it to be, that you don't have a winner, because India has as much of trade. So if you look at the trading partnership between India and US, India and China, both are the largest trading partners of India. So it does not really, does not openly really have a lot of, it would not want the competition to go on. But at the same point of time, when it is going on, India would like to kind of, look for its own strategic opportunities. For instance, India is at least enhancing its partnership with US. US is increasingly looking at India as a prominent partner in the Indo-Pacific theater. If you look at the Indo-Pacific policy, which was taken out by Biden, India played a very prominent role, and it was reiterated. The cooperation and the partnership with India was given a focus when we looked at Indo-Pacific policy or Indo-Pacific vision by US. So we do have these developments. We do see these developments going on, and to that extent, where even when India does say that it will not take a stand in the Ukraine-Russia war, considering that it has Russia has been a traditional partner for India, US does understand that to an extent. And even if it is not really the happiest when India really outrightly says that it will not take a stand, US does give it a benefit of doubt or the autonomy for India to take its own decisions as a power. Now, if we drift apart, if we go beyond US, India also takes the opportunity to enhance its partnerships with other powers in the Indo-Pacific. So India is looking all directions to enhance its partnership. India is looking towards the East. It has its Act East policy, it's enhancing its partnership with the ASEAN countries. It is enhancing its partnership with Japan. It is enhancing the partnership with South Korea, Australia, the Pacific countries. It is trying to look for strategic opportunities to not just focus on the US-China strategic competition, but it's also kind of looking for opportunities where it can strengthen its own power, or its own economic relations, or its own strategic relationship with power. So when we say that this competition may go on, and it might as well go on for a long time because of the way not just economically both the powers, US and China, are placed, but as any in any balance of power relationship, there would be a tussle between the first and the second largest powers. We expect this relationship to go on, with security aspects coming out more and playing a more and more important role in the relationship. But US as a country will not just be focused on the competition. As a country which is increasingly focusing on its own national interests, and it's looking to enhance its its stature in the international community and in the Indo-Pacific region, it will move beyond the competition. It will look for more partners, and it will strengthen the partnership it already has with countries. So if you look at, let's say, developmental partnerships with countries, it is doing a very good job with Japan, for instance. It is going on creating connectivity projects, something which India has as an argument talked about how COVID-19 has produced a demand for connectivity. It is going on doing that with Japan. It is going on doing that with ASEAN. So it is playing a role through these areas, healthcare, developmental partnerships, and such like that. It is doing this a lot. So it is trying to make sure that by not getting pulled into the competition, it is trying to stay out of the competition. It is making sure that it is not unnecessarily being it is not unnecessarily pulled into something which is not its own competition. It is between them, but at the same point of time, we will want to make sure that the competition does not stop India's growth or does not stop its own. It does not prevent India to kind of achieve its national interest, and the national interest at the end of the day is to economically be benefited, economically rise, and as a power also rise in the region and then as in the global arena.
So, okay, so the next question, so it's actually about the India and its other relations with other countries. So India, when I wrote my article, this is the impression I had, is that India seems to be excluded from the initiatives of regional cooperation and integration in the region. So it is not part of the SN+3. It is not part of the TPP. Well, it's not existing anymore, but it wasn't part of this TPP. It's not part of the APEC. And so what are the reasons for this exclusion? Do you think India has a future in these partnerships?
So when we look at these partnerships, I wouldn't say that India is isolated, or as you mentioned. You've also mentioned RCEP, if I'm not wrong. Yes. So when we look at these countries, when we talk about ASEAN +3, I do believe that it is a grouping which would want to focus on East Asian security and East Asian economics. So I'm not very sure if India fits as much, and even if it wants to be, I think definitely it is not one of the reasons as India being an isolated power that is the reason that it's not a part of it. But I would want to focus on RCEP because I do feel that I do have a very different opinion of why India is not a part of RCEP, and it is. I don't really completely agree that it is. It is isolated. So, and I think I would want to kind of discuss that. So when we look at it not being a part of, for instance, I'll choose RCEP as my focus point. So when we look at why India did not become part of RCEP, first there has to be we have to create a very comprehensive view of why it did not choose RCEP, and then we can go on, have discussions about other platforms it isn't a part of. But one of the main reasons was that it did focus on its domestic, as any developing country would be, it was focused on its domestic growth and national interest rather than kind of opening its economy to countries with which it had negative trade balances. Now it does have negative trade balances with several RCEP members, and the main one being China. So another thing was that at this point of time, India is trying to enhance the self-reliance. It has policies like Atmanirbhar Bharat, and it is trying to create self-reliance in India and inside India. Now, when for one of the reasons it did not really open up its economy with RCEP was that it did feel that its industries, for example, the agriculture and the industry sector were, I won't say prepared for it, but it did at that point of time were not the most prepared to handle competition from, let's say, countries like China, which it did feel would lose out to when we do see the cheap product, and that's how at least India perceives it. If we look at the face of the cheap products or cheap manufacturing China has, when we look at the export, that's one of the reasons it is the manufacturing hub. It did not really want that. It did not really feel that the companies are that much ready to kind of take on that competition. And of course, we can't deny the fact that it does consider China a security, if not a threat, as it does not really officially say that, but it has security concerns regarding China. It has rising border tensions with China, which have been argued by many. And I won't say, and there actually has been a lot of discussion inside India about should it be a part of RCEP. There have been many scholars who do feel that India is sacrificing an opportunity to shape the trading architecture of one of the world's most economically dynamic regions. And it is foregoing market access in sectors which is India's forte. So when we look at information technology services and pharmaceuticals, that is India's forte, and it did by not participating in RCEP, let go of these opportunities. There have been many scholars who have also talked about how this is there is a risk of trade diversion of its partners. For example, if India does not join RCEP, its partners might also kind of look elsewhere for trade. And that is really important when India is trying to woo Japan. It is trying to woo South Korea as very, very important trading partners. India is all, but at the same point of time, no matter what I really feel India at this point of time feels, that is not ready, but India at the same point of time has also signed many FTAs with many ASEAN countries. It has FTAs with Japan, it has FTAs with South Korea, it has FTAs with Australia. It has, it does have a lot of, bilateral trading agreements with these countries, which reflect that, which reflect India's acknowledgement that it would want to play a prominent role in the region, even if it does not want to kind of participate in one of the agreements, which is at this point of time, it feels will harm its domestic interests. And as any country would, India would want to look at the situation which is there in its own country, where it's a developing country. Its farmers need protection. Its industry still needs protection. And at this point of time, it does not want to compete with a country, let's say, which it shares security concerns. So it also kind of, you do have the security concern also in play at this point of time. And there are, of course, views that India cannot yield the same benefits with FTAs, with bilateral agreements as it would have with RCEP. However, I would still argue that considering India's domestic and geopolitical imperatives, it is diversifying and expanding its scope of options in all directions. It is looking for economic partnerships with more and more countries. So I would say that at the end of the day, that because it is not a part of groupings, it is isolated from the world or isolated from a region. It also is trying its level best to kind of balance its options, and it is trying its level best to connect with countries, if not through RCEP, but through bilateral agreements, to other groupings with which India is a part of. It also, we also need to remember that RCEP includes a pathway for India to participate in the cooperation activities pending accession and the fast track accession option. Should India at some point, want to join RCEP, should India in future want to, should India in the future feel that, okay, now it is ready for the competition, or now it's ready to open its economy to completely removing the protection, RCEP has given the option to kind of fast track India's participation in RCEP. So yeah, so I won't really say that I'm absolutely saying that India will never be a part of RCEP, but at this point of time, India will not be a part of RCEP, and it will look at other opportunities and other ways to connect with the region. And at some point, when India feels it is prepared, it will, and it might join RCEP.
Okay, very interesting. So, sorry, so just an additional question I'm having, because I'm curious. Are you saying that for now, because India is a developing country, it is better for its own national interest to have more bilateral agreements than multilateral agreements?
Right. See, it is also case-to-case basis. Now, if you look at the way RCEP is, the agreement is formed, it does not feel comfortable in, let's say, trading with countries with which it has a lot of negative trade balance. One of them is China. But that is exactly the case with RCEP. But let's say there are groupings where it feels that it has moderate trade balances, or it can actually take the chance and get involved in such groupings and have economic relations in a group, it will definitely participate. Right now, of course, as I said, when I'm talking about developing countries, India as a developing country, it is against, let's say, one country or few countries with which it holds a certain economic relation. And it does feel that if it joins the RCEP, it will lose out rather than gain. That's one of the reasons it is not joining RCEP. Because if you look at the trading balance China holds, let's say, with India, it is pretty much going on in negative. And if this is as a national argument, which the reason which was given by India to not join RCEP, if it does open or just remove the protection, it will become the industries which are still growing, let's say in the agriculture industries which are still growing, and the industrial sector itself, which is still growing and booming in India, will be facing with competition with a lot of Chinese, let's say, the Chinese markets and Chinese products, which I'm not very sure how, it is also not very sure how good it will fare. So I think at this point of time, it would want to not really participate in something which it feels might worsen the domestic and the condition rather than kind of improve it. But of course, as I said, that there are discussions in India. There have been people in really prominent scholars who still feel that India should have taken the chance to kind of give the upper hand to industries which are the forte of India, where India is better than China, or India is better than many countries. For example, the pharmaceutical industry, the medical sector. This is where India really has the IT sector also. So this is India's forte. So there have been a lot of discussions that India should have. And as a democracy, there will be, of course, discussions. So the discussions are happening because at no point India has said that it will never join RCEP. I think the discussions are happening so that it sets the stage for India to keep on thinking about its decision as the negotiations take place in RCEP. So when it does feel, and if it does feel that this is the time I should join RCEP, I think it would want to, I can't really predict the future, but then definitely it has not, and in no official statement has it said that it will never join RCEP. It is not closed the door permanently.
Except the Asian countries, who do you think could be a partner of India? Is India directing its strategy towards the United States and Europe, and how this could help to establish itself in the Indo-Pacific? So to re-say it a little, it would be the question, so is the relations that India could develop, for example, with Europe and with the United States, could these relationships help India to kind of impose itself in the Indo-Pacific? That would be the question.
Right. Okay. So now, if you look at, again, when we look at India's definition of Indo-Pacific, one of the reasons India is increasingly participating, or at least having partnerships, focusing on partnerships, not just in the Asian region, but also is focusing on partnerships with the US and Europe, is that it feels it is a very prominent part of its Indo-Pacific vision. And it's in the way it has, at this point in time, I want to kind of use this argument that India is one of the only few countries which uses the inclusive term in its definition of Indo-Pacific. When we say inclusive, we mean that India is welcoming partnerships with many countries which were traditionally not seen to be a part of, let's say, the region. So when we look at the EU, the reason it is increasingly wanting to kind of, venture out and have partnerships and strengthen the partnerships is that there are many, I could just probably list these reasons. One of them, of course, is the economic reason. It wants to venture out and have as many economic partners as possible to enhance its own economy, and at the same point of time share really good economic relations. It is traditionally, India probably was not seen as a very prominent part of the Indo-Pacific, but with the recent times with the coming of the Indo-Pacific notion or the coming of the Indo-Pacific concept, India hasn't started, I won't say started to, but India has, the focus on India has been enhanced. And India wants to take this opportunity to enhance its partnerships with not just the traditional regional domain it has always been in, but also because it is one of the major economies in the world. When we look at these predictions that India would be one of the top, let's say the 10 economies in the world, let's say in the 2030s, it wants to take the opportunity to be, if not a global power immediately, but at least be a regional power. For it to be a regional power, it needs to kind of expand not just its relation, but also its approach, its vision. It has to expand it. And when I expand it, it has to look equally towards the West as it has to look towards the East. So till now, India's always focused on policies like Act East policy. Hence we've always felt that India will look at East, but with its power getting enhanced, or it feeling that it does hold that power to look equally at the West, it does feel that it needs to use these opportunities to look at EU, for example, and have partnerships with countries in the EU. So it does share, it has enhanced its conversations and discussions with the EU members on not just its relationships with the EU, but also other situations or other developments that are happening in the Indo-Pacific. So you have, for example, a lot of conversation happening between UK and India. You have a lot of conversations happening with France and India. You have conversations happening with basically a lot of new countries and India. So it is participating, and it wants to participate in that sector of Indo-Pacific. Now coming to US, as I said, US is increasing its focus on India. If you look at, again, Biden's policy, Biden's Indo-Pacific policy, India does play a very prominent role. What basically India wants to do is that it also wants to, of course, increase its power projection in the region. And it does understand that its power projection just cannot increase if it just focuses on one theater. It has to focus on on the larger Indo-Pacific theater. So it is using the opportunity it has, where not just India is looking towards the countries, but the countries are also looking towards India. So you have in EU also looking at India to strengthen their relationship with India. So it is taking that opportunity of the renewed or the enhanced focus it is getting in Indo-Pacific to enhance its own power projection. One of the reasons being that it does understand that it has a very complicated neighborhood. Its neighborhoods, it has countries with which it does not share the best of the relations. Its neighborhood has China, with which it anyway, I mean, it considers China as a concern, as a power, as a security concern. I won't say economic concern yet, because it does have trading relations with China, but it does have security concerns with China. It does have military concerns with China, because we have a border, we have a border dispute with China, which has not been resolved, which is going on for decades now. It does have that. It also shares complicated relationship with Pakistan, which is, so we basically have two very concerning neighbors on both our sides. And it needs a lot of partners for it to enhance its power projection in the region, when it knows that it has its neighbors, but let's say it might not want to count on those neighbors if it is under threat. So it needs partners. It would want to kind of, have partnerships and increase its own power, economic power, military power, diplomatic power, for it to kind of at least have that stature in the theater, for it to be considered a major power